Is Planet X God's divine judgment during the final apocalypse of redemption? Part 3. We have already gone into the Nibiru, Planet X binary star systems, incoming, the catastrophes, pre-flood, and the Anunnaki Watchers. The Anunnaki and the Watchers, was there a superior race to the humans in the era before the flood? Concerning the planet Nibiru, Zecharia Sitchin suggested that there lived a technologically superior race of human-like extraterrestrials that in the Sumerian words were called the Anunnaki. About 450,000 years ago, they did come down to this planet looking for minerals and gold, which they mined on the southern continent of Africa. It was his opinion that modern-day humans were genetically engineered by the Anunnaki, where the Homo erectus females were genetically implanted with extraterrestrial genes, and the Homo sapien human race was created to work as slaves in the gold mines for the Anunnaki. Devoid in all of Sitchin's writings is the concept of the divine creation of man, created in the image of God. He may have been relying on the scientific instinct that the writings of the ancients were more true and accurate than the Hebrews. So if that's the case, he was defiling the name of God of his ancestors, for the God of Israel was above all other gods. Also not perceived in Sitchin's writings with a desire of the divine God to create Adam with a free will, and thus give to Adam and his descendants the honor to be the custodians of this planet, not as oppressed slaves, but as agents and emissaries of the divine God. If we adhere to the context of the biblical narrative in the Torah, the genetic engineering as created by the Anunnakians may have been reverse engineered of Hashem's creation. It appears that these ancient watchers took the image of God, humans of Adamic descent, the descent from Adam, and mixed their genes with the genes of the knuckle-walking apes and created intermediate species that the Sumerians believed the pre-flood Anunnaki used as amoral, mine-working human ape slaves in their reputed gold mining industry in South Africa, in Southern Africa, and also in South America, in Peru, and around Lake Titicaca, as documented again by Zecharia Sitchin. The scientific documentation of these facts by a nationally recognized Seventh-day Adventist creationist paleontologist Lee Spencer, Ph.D., was documented in his study of cranial features in the scientific article titled Apes, Ape Men, and Man. In the summary of his study of cranial and postcranial data in the scientific evaluation of the skulls of hominid, upright walking humans, and Pongidae, knuckle walking apes, skulls, this is what he wrote. Lee Spencer, Ph.D., quote, "The fossil humanoid crania show a gradation of morphologies between those characteristics seen in the apes but not in humans, to those characteristics seen in humans but not in apes. There's also a gradation in endocrinal volume. Similarly, the postcranial skeletons of the hominids examined exhibit many characteristics that are intermediate, as well as a mixture of other characteristics that are either ape-like or human-like. Therefore, it is difficult to maintain the position that there are no morphological intermediates between apes and man. So what explanation for the existence of fossil intermediaries can we posit other than evolution from a common ancestor, an explanation that is falsified by the order of appearance of various features in various lineages? With the introduction of the polygenetic systematic methodology, there are no unfalsified hypotheses of human evolutionary lineages. An explanation that is consistent with the data and with the biblical account of origins is that man has been engaged in exchanging genetic material with the Pungids, either in nature or in the laboratory. The variety of forms can be attributed to some form of reticulation, wherein the original creature outcrossed to both H. Homo sapiens, that is, and Pungids, as well as interbreeding with their own group. Michael Day, in a booklet in the Oxford Carolina Reader series titled The Fossil History of Man, asserts that the skull from the cave of Arago, quote, shows a mixture of both Erectus and Sapiens features. It may be regarded as an example of mosaic evolution that may be an Erectus Sapiens intergrade, end quote. That such is possible is doubted by few knowledgeable anthropologists. Do we suggest that the exchanging of genetic material between humans, Homo sapiens that is, and Pungids, apes, was part of the genetic reengineering that the Watchers called the sons of God did while on this planet? Within the mythologies and the ancients, this seems a possibility, for the mammalian kingdom strange species such as the centaur, half horse and half man, appear to be genetically created. It appears that the Hebrews' creation story leads better credibility to creation traditions and the stories about an angelic race called the sons of God. The Jewish accounts leave records that once upon a time, quote, other earthly beings, end quote, visited this planet on a mission for the divine. Part of them rebelled and thus became known as the fallen angels. They were possibly part of a larger rebellion in the heavens of the dark forces that took a third of the angelic hosts and today remain under the rule of Lucifer in a cosmic revolt against the Lord of the divine hosts. These strange events in human biblical history will be explored, but first we have to explore the transforming battles of humans and their images and perceptions of the ancestral history. Did our human ancestors live during eras that were associated with great catastrophes and calamities of nature? Were the stories and legends and myths that they left behind images of an overactive mind? Or were the pearls, quote unquote, embedded within them, a part of literal human history? So this is what we're going to explore, these poignant issues as we continue to search for the truth concerning Planet X. And we'll go into that as a fourth video, Velikovsky and Sagan, the quest to understanding catastrophic Earth history. Velikovsky versus Sagan, Carl Sagan, the quest to understanding catastrophic Earth history, Planet X, and the 2012 Mayan end of the age. Hashem's, the Lord's name, emissary, brings judgment and redemption to planet Earth. This is what Dr. Robert Mock writes. Part 2, Yom Kippur, September 28, 2009. This was posted November 21, 2009. Emanuel Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision. The topics that will be discussed here: Velikovsky, Albert Einstein, and Freud, and the quest to understanding the God of the Exodus. Carl Sagan debacle of Emanuel Velikovsky. The divine number of 12. The mysterious Jupiter-sized stellar body discovered. A new planet discovered in the outer solar system. A giant breach in Earth's magnetic field. The Earth's ionosphere is plunging. Well, we'll just start here and we'll continue. Emanuel Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision. It was in the 1950s that the nation was riveted by a newcomer rewriting history and the history of the ancient Israelites when the Russian-born Jewish-American psychiatrist Emanuel Velikovsky wrote a hugely popular bestseller titled Worlds in Collision. This is where he compares the ancient mythologies around the world and postulated that this planet Earth had in the past experienced catastrophic close contacts, flybys, in other words, near-Earth potential Earth impacts, with other planets. It was his opinion that the closest candidates were the planets Venus and Mars, but the important concept was the upheaval that the Earth felt and the effect upon the psyche of the Earth's inhabitants that it experienced the calamities. His theory was not a threat to biblical history, but that it did herald the collapse of the Darwinian uniformitarian views on cosmology, geology, and human history. The implications in dating of Velikovsky's ancient biblical history were that the chronologies of ancient Egypt and ancient Israel as normative used by modern archaeologists were different by over 500 years. He believed that the Exodus was not in the era of Ramses II the Great of the New Kingdom of Egypt, but occurred in the collapse of the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. The Hyksos that invaded the collapsing imperial Egypt were the same as the biblical Amalekites, he says. They were continuously attacking the fleeing Israelites, killing especially the women and children at the rear of the massive moving body of humans heading east away from Egypt. These Amalekites were especially known in the biblical history for their genetic hatred for the Israelites, as represented by the Amalekite king Agag, whom the prophet Samuel had to kill because King Saul refused. The sin against the God of Israel by King Saul gave us King Agag's Amalekite Israel descendant, Haman the Agag, the Persian prime minister who sought to initiate a Holocaust of the Jews in the Persian Empire in the days of Queen Esther. We all know that story. They had a 3-day fast. Mordecai, her uncle, warned her of the plans against Israel. Now today, it's written in the Old Testament. Today, the Amalekites are represented by Hamas Palestinian chapter of the Nazi-inspired Muslim Brotherhood, and in these Palestinians who have no other concepts of international relations with Israel and the Jewish people but to be against them, driving them out of their land into the sea. Also, Velikovsky believed that the biblical queen of Sheba was the Egyptian queen Hatshepsut. The biblical Shishak, king of Egypt, was the pharaoh Tutmosis III, and the famous Amarna letters, 18th dynasty, actually wrote about the kingdom of Israel to the north and Judah to the south in the days of King Ahab. What was most revealing was the Ipuwer papyrus that Velikovsky had discovered. It was about a catastrophe that replicated the Egyptian story of the Exodus during the Second Intermediate Period of Egypt, now accepted to be around the date of 1450 BC. The translations of the text, the Ipuwer papyrus, and the Torah version of the Exodus is today online by the courtesy of Jewish site OHR, titled The 10 Plagues Live from Egypt. The most amazing impact was the visual effect upon the reader of watching a planetary flyby. Can you imagine? As the geomagnetic forces of the two planet bodies cause severe catastrophes upon each planet by the collision of the magnetic forces of each planet. So it's the magnetic forces that were creating all this havoc. Yet humans lived to tell the story, and the legends of the ancients as they, in turn, inserted themselves into the myths of their ancient and ancestral peoples. Now, Velikovsky was born in 1895 to the prosperous Jewish family in Vitebsk, Russia, now the state of Belarus. Emmanuel's father, Simon Yahiel Velikovsky, and his mother, Bella Grodensky, trained the young Emmanuel Velikovsky early to become polylingual as a child. He studied at the Medvednikov Gymnasium in Moscow, excelling in Russian and mathematics, and graduated with a gold medal in 1913. After that, he started in medicine at Montpellier in France and graduated just before the onset of World War I with his degree in medicine at the University of Moscow at the year of 1921. Though many claim that Immanuel Velikovsky was a secular Jew, his dedication to his father, Shimon Yehiel Velikovsky, in his second book, Agonists in Chaos, 1952, gave a different testimony. It also gives us a taste of the core values of his father, what his father gave his son. Immanuel Velikovsky, quote, "From the day when at the age of 13 he left the home of his parents and went on foot to one of the old centers of the Talmudic learning in Russia, to the day when in December 1937 at the age of 78 he ended his years in the land of Israel, he devoted his life, his fortune, his peace of mind, all that he had, to the realization of what was once an idea, the renaissance of the Jewish people in the ancient land. He contributed to the revival of the language of the Bible and the development of modern Hebrew by publishing, with Dr. Klausner as editor, collected works on Hebrew philology to the revival of Jewish scientific thought. He was the first to redeem the land in Negev, the home of his patriarchs, and he organized a cooperative settlement there, which he called Ruhama. Today it is the largest agricultural development in northern Negev. We don't know who we have to thank for intellectual preparedness for the reconstruction of the ancient history, if not my late father Shimon, he says, end quote. Now, Velikovsky, Einstein, and Freud, and the quest to understand the God of the Exodus. Close friend, confidant, and colleague of the eminent physicist Albert Einstein, Velikovsky, the two of them dialogued in depth about burgeoning science of cosmology and the inflexibility of science. Together, Albert Einstein and Immanuel Velikovsky, in this dialogue, as witness in Velikovsky's archives, documents a series of letters between Velikovsky and Einstein. These only enhanced the affirmation that the two men, both Jews, enjoyed exploring the science of God's creation. This correspondence was also explored in Velikovsky's book, quote, Before the Day Breaks, end quote, as discussed in the article Dr. Immanuel Velikovsky and His Work. One of the few scientists he was that objectively and seriously dealt with Velikovsky's work was Albert Einstein. In the last 2 years of Einstein's life, the two met regularly and had scientific discussions and even developed a personal friendship. After Einstein's death, Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision was found open on Einstein's desk, so he was reading it. Immanuel Velikovsky was also a student of the Jewish psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud's first pupil, Wilhelm Steckel. Velikovsky later became Israel's first practicing psychoanalyst. As a neuropsychologist, Velikovsky, early in his career, suggested that patients with seizure disorders or epilepsy could be identified and categorized by their abnormal encephalograms. He even became the founder and editor of the scholarly publication in which his father's foundation supported Scripta Universitatis, whose physics and mathematics section was chaired by his friend Albert Einstein. Yet, in the research of the life and friends of his mentor Sigmund Freud, the young Immanuel began to ponder the status of the universe, as portrayed in the Hebrew texts of his forefathers. The imagery was so vivid that there appeared a special reality of literalness that was so antithetical to the world immersed in Darwinian uniformitarianism. The catastrophes and plagues of the Exodus were a mystery where hail, fire, earthquakes were the prime agents that destroyed the most powerful empire in the ancient world of that era, the pharaohs in Egypt. He puzzled about the pillar of fire that became the symbol of the presence of the Divine One of Israel. Were these images truly literal And what extraordinary event could have been the vehicle that could have produced them? So Velikovsky began to research the annals of the ancients. He studied all the accounts of the ancient Egyptian records, and he puzzled over the overwhelming parallel accounts of the papyrus in the Leiden Museum called the Ipuwer Papyrus, where the ancient lamentations of the sage over the catastrophic destruction of Egypt parallel to a remarkable degree, of course, the biblical account of the Exodus. Even more startling was the remarkable imagery of red rivers and blazing skies. Red rivers, we see those today with the eruption of Kilauea in Hawaii. It's like blood coming out of the earth. It's so fast. A river of lava. So yes, red rivers, the blazing skies, and pestilence sweeping the nations. Yet it was not just the Egyptian records, but also the Babylonian tales, the Assyrian, the ancient Vedic tales, and the Indus Valley epics, and the legends of the Americas' native populations called Indians in North America. The Aztecs, the Mayans, the Mesoamericans, and the ancient Peruvian legends on the Pacific Alpine regions of Peru. Here, in cultures all over the world, were similar tales of vivid catastrophes that could only have occurred by a celestial visitor as the harbinger of death and destruction. As Velikovsky analyzed deeper, he began to see parallel symbolism by the ancients that pointed to certain planetary bodies. Was it a flyby of a comet that came close enough to violently tear the Earth from her planetary axis, affect her orbital rotations, produce global mega-earthquakes, winds roaring in a violence never seen or perceived, and falling stones of planetoids crashing upon our lands? He noted that in the legends, stories, and myths of land far-flung around the globe, an agent causing disasters was routinely identified not as an invading asteroid, but as a planet that came too close enough to have such catastrophic intimacy with the inhabitants of Earth. In the land of Babylon, they spoke of the torch star called the long-haired Venus. In Egypt, it was the great star. In Mexico, the smoking star. In Peru, the long-haired star. Yet all of them were depicting the planet Venus as a flaming dragon or serpent, and all smoke of the symbolism of the same planetary comet Velikovsky identified as the planet Venus. In an eloquently written article by Michael Goodspeed titled Velikovsky's Ghost Returns, he says that Velikovsky also sensed the feelings of fear and awe as the earliest astronomers in the ancient world observed the planet Venus. No matter whether they were on the Eurasian continent or continents of the Americas, the benign astronomical cosmology of modern astronomers explaining of the evolutions of planets in quiet and undisturbed isolation did not adequately account why they were perceived with such emotion, unless in the ancient historical past these planetoid bodies produced traumatic experiences upon the human population. So out of the extensive research on all continents, Velikovsky concluded that in the pre-recorded history of mankind, the planet Venus erupted and was expelled from the giant gaseous planet Jupiter, and with this awe-inspiring cometary tale brought with it a train of millions of asteroids and comets as they approached the Earth about 1500 BC, or the time of the Exodus. When it was over, these planets became known in the legends and traditions of the ancients as gods of terror, whether Venus or the ancient war god Mars when she arrived, but it was captured in our sun's magnetic sphere, first as an unstable orbit in a great elliptical arc until each of them settled into stable orbits in the 8th to 7th century BC. Velikovsky's historical revisionism of ancient history sought to synchronize Egyptian chronology with the Jewish biblical history. This immediately brought immense academic wrath upon his writings, yet the public loved his books. Concepts of the planet Venus expelling from planet Jupiter and creating the great red spot on the maternal Caesarean section scar on the mother planet energized the creative thinking of his devotees. Then he proposed that repeated flybys of another planetary body close enough to Earth caused planet Earth's orbital rotation to stop, start, change its polar axis, and thereby cause huge catastrophic geological effects upon the landscape of his planet and the psychological subconscious, of course, of its people. These were huge catastrophes. These catastrophes included giant tsunamis miles high, crustal slippage and movement of continents, 10 to 15 degrees in hours, immense earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and lava outflows that wreaked havoc on this planet. These concepts became the background of the great plagues of Egypt, the smoldering lava flows from the mount called Sinai, not on the Sinai Peninsula but in the Arabian Desert along the ancient volcanic highlands along the eastern coast of the Red Sea. The smoldering and erupting volcano at the mouth called Sinai and the parting of the Red Sea was then put into a historical drama that spread this dynamic concept of catastrophic history all around the world. This rampage of the planet Venus was followed soon after by the war planet Mars on its proto-orbital rotation. These became the great riveting images that poured out of his three most classic books, the trilogy of Worlds in Collision, and its sequels, Earth in Upheaval and Ages in Chaos. Velikovsky's theories were so well taken that one writer threatened Macmillan Publishing that if the first book of Immanuel Velikovsky, Worlds of Collision, was released to the public by the printing press, that he, Harlow Shapley, would refuse to honor his contract with Macmillan to publish his anticipated astronomy text. This was followed suits by other scientists, and Macmillan caved to the academic blackmail. They turned the rights of publication over to Doubleday, who earned millions with an instant bestseller, and rocketed Velikovsky's to international fame. In retrospect, this was tactical disaster for Macmillan because Velikovsky gained immediate fame as a persecuted genius and one of the greats persecuted by his peers. His enemies failed to comprehend that their universal scientific opinions were becoming dinosaurs of the past. How we look at world history would never be the same because of the visions of this Jewish author, Velikovsky. Here he created in words a portrayal of the God of Israel that was involved and engaged with the God of Israel with this world that was also demonstrated to be a vibrant and dynamic culture. The world of the ancient patriarchs of the Jewish people was now being written with the geological evidence of centuries of recurrent catastrophes, a world long seen as extinct through the prism of 3,000 years of uniformitarian climactic peace, was now visibly returning once again to a prophetic era of apocalyptic catastrophes. The challenging solutions that Velikovsky addressed with the evidence from legends and myths and the true Torah historical evidence demonstrated God's sovereign intervention during these catastrophes in the lives of the ancient Hebrews. This came in part to vindicate the literal Moses of the Exodus, and the historical person had been destroyed by the earlier Jewish psychiatrist Sigmund Freud that left the historical remnants of his ancient Hebrew giant in ruins. His psychological reconstruction began when Moses, in Freud's Moses and monotheism, borrowed the concepts of monotheism from the earlier monotheistic Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten, evoked by the resemblance of Psalm 104 in the biblical text to the Egyptian hymn discovered on the wall of the tomb of Ai, the general of the pharaoh Akhenaten. Velikovsky, on the other hand, sought to restore Moses to a much earlier era and whose concept of monotheism came from his desert experience with God, the great I Am. By revising the data of Moses earlier, the entire chronology of Egypt had to also be revised by several hundred years. This put Egyptian chronology subservient to biblical Hebrew chronology. This again evoked the wrath of the eminent archaeologists of the world who sought to return Egyptian history to its supreme and sacred role. According to Pentateuch Torah, the Exodus occurred at least 450 years before the building of the Temple of Solomon, somewhere between the years 1450 and 1550 BC, during the conventional dates of the 18th dynastic pharaoh of Ramesses, Moses II, as the strong and powerful pharaoh of old. The monumental statues of Ramesses II only fortified this view in the eyes of the 19th century Victorian British as the strong pharaoh that knew not Joseph. The facts that the Exodus was dated by conventional Egyptian archaeology to 1239-2013 BC produce a lot of problems because there was no archaeological evidence to support such a historical date. Velikovsky and later his historian David Rohl, who wrote the book titled A Test of Time, claimed that the pharaoh of the Exodus was actually the pharaoh Dudimoses of Egyptian 13th dynasty. The name of Moses was the generic name for an Egyptian prince or royal son. As noted in Egyptian history, Tutmosis actually meant the son of Thoth. Moses meant the son of the Egyptian god Amen, and Ramesses meant the son of the Egyptian god Ra. It was a documentation of the famous Egyptian historian Manetho, who wrote that during the time of the Dudimoses in Egypt, the wrath of God was discovered along with catastrophic destruction of the Egyptian civilization during that period. Yet, was the God of Israel also giving us multi-drama of the last Exodus, when the lost tribes of the house of Israel would, as prophesied upon the honor of God's holy name, return back to the land of their inheritance 3,600 years later, before the coming of the Messiah at the time of the end?